We've had a very stimulating day of presentations today, and we've looked at this issue from every angle possible. And what we want to try and do in this session is to focus on one of the key questions that really was at the backdrop of the presentations right from this morning and running as a sort of red thread, as it were, through everything we've discussed, namely how to turn the burden, if you see it as a burden, of chemical management into successful and profitable innovation. Debbie Raphael said this morning about, and I quote, regulation is the mother of invention. A very nice quote, I think. The question is, how do we make sure that it can indeed play that role?
We look at regulations as a must-do, a basic requirement, a license to do business. We want to actually take a step beyond that where we can and make sure we're compliant to not just today's regulations but tomorrow's. I think the challenge is going to be is to keep operating in the marketplace to provide better products, because in a global market, the customers are out there wanting better and better products all the time. We want to provide them with and working with them to provide sustainable solutions. So the key challenge, I think, is recognizing we're making some changes in what substances we're using, or we're managing substances very carefully. Can we make sure that we're efficient and providing sustainable products in the market?
For the business, I think is to accept really chemicals management needs to be high up in the hierarchy. It's a decision on the board level. It's a strategic decision. It's not anymore a question for sustainability department somewhere down there. It's a strategic decision. So that is for the business. And for the policy, I think we need more conditions in place to make it really profitable to be progressive. For some companies are already making money with it being progressive, but not all of them. So I mean, if REACH would deliver authorization candidates, would deliver this innovation process, I think that would be fine. But I think also it would be good to start kind of best available technology for chemicals and the process where we use chemicals, like we have for the automotive industry and other industries. We should use the same approach for chemicals as well.
We need to ensure that there are progressive companies out there which we can work with. Some technical developments we can do on our own, but we need others. And we need to have organizations like ChemSec, which is helping to drive the agenda. We want to be in the forefront. We want to be future-proofing our products already today.
Yeah. It feels to me like the chemical industry, it's been, as I said, a long journey. And I used to be a consultant doing some work with the chemical industry, and it was quite a job to get the chemical companies we were talking to think of themselves as having responsibility beyond the factory gates. They did a very good job in the 1990s and the early part of this century around responsible care and improving systems for managing their own operations within the factory, within the chemical plants. And it's been quite hard to get them to embrace the product agenda. I think they are beginning to, and there's exceptions who are in the lead. But even still today, it still feels like it's a compliance-oriented approach. That they're focused on the regulation as a sort of as a minimum standard, rather than being creative about where this agenda can take them and the opportunity that lies in front of them.
And why, just to follow up on that, why do you think that is when you contrast it with what happened on the care issue? Is it because there is a huge compliance agenda that people have sort of got so obsessed with that? Have they just lost sight of the bigger picture?
I think that's probably true, and I was trying to draw parallels with other industries that I follow, and I think the car industry is quite interesting in that I mean, this is largely driven by regulation, but the emission standards and the 2020 emission standard of 95 grams per kilometre that's just been finally agreed. I mean, that industry is so innovative now around technologies that they're developing to help them achieve that target, whether it's around turbochargers or hybridization or lightweighting. You can't go to an auto show and not see a whole range of different products. I mean, they've had to embrace it, but they really have now embraced it and see it as an innovation agenda. Google used to talk about, they used to say that creativity loves constraints. And I think, the regulatory driver just sort of mimicking the words that you said this morning, really is as an opportunity to innovate and differentiate.
We cannot be alone, and we need to move the industry as well. What we tell about is just a couple of our 10,000 projects in a year. We can do much more, and we can do it together with others. We heard about CNA working with their suppliers. We heard about the coalition of retail. There you can find good synergies that actually can be useful.
So
for
look
all.
across sectors as well as within your own.
When I'm talking to a company that's interested in putting its toe in the sustainability world, the last thing I talk about is toxicity, because it's very scary to people. So you can bring them in, we bring people in looking at climate, looking at water efficiency and energy efficiency, and then say, oh yes, there's this other thing as well. So I think that's the challenge for all of us in this room, is we understand the importance of the toxicity element and at how it tends to get minimized in the conversation when you're talking about sustainability. So I'm very impressed that you have metrics on your toxicity, not just on your energy and water. I think that's incredibly important for companies to do. For example, I have no idea if Apple does that. I know they have, and I know Apple's in the room, so I'll pick on them. Because they have been very, in my mind, silent about their great strides on toxicity. I don't hear them talking about it. And I hope tomorrow we can talk about why some companies are more silent than others on this issue.
In terms of the question about how we get companies to be less compliance-oriented and more innovative or sort of innovation-oriented, I mean, it's clearly not one or t'other. We still need to deliver compliance. But I think, in a way, it's a false choice, because we're constantly in flux. There's no status quo, and a company that's saying that we don't want to invest in new products because perhaps it'll cannibalize our existing business, will discover that somebody else cannibalizes your existing business. So, I think it's a false choice, really, to say it's compliance or innovation. I think that isn't the way the world works, really.
Julian, did you want to add something?
I mean, I think we can do play our part by talking about the positive examples, and I think once these alternative technologies get established into the marketplace, it generates a lot of market pull.
I wanted to add something about how to move companies.
Yes.
Who is doing that and who should do it? I mean, many NGOs do that. I mean, ChemSec do not have any sticks, but other organizations do have sticks. And they are having consumer campaigns and pushing forward a market, which product to avoid and which product to use and so on. We don't have that sticks. We just have carrots at ChemSec. So for us, it's really to talk to companies to clarify for them that if you, for example, your customers are consumers, yeah, and you happen to have some chemicals that the consumers would not like, you will damage your reputation. In the end, this is about market shares. Yeah. So for the ones that are very close to consumer, this is of course extremely important, in particular today, with the social media always. I mean, the consumers are so unfaithful, yeah? They change so rapidly. I never really understood it. I'm already too old, I realize, but it happens so quickly. So therefore, they're so sensitive to these, so many companies, and therefore they want to avoid it, and therefore they want to be moved ahead.
You tend not to get very energetic support for change, whereas you get vociferous kind of rejection of change.
And what for you is naming and shaming the way to turn more companies from compliance to innovation, or is the carrot emphasizing the benefits to be had, the examples of companies like we're hearing from today, the way to do it?
Well, it clearly isn't either or, is it? But I mean, I think when you look back over the last few decades, and you can point to examples of companies that have got it in the neck. I mean, Nike would be a classic example of a business that was absolutely hammered, and its reputation dragged through the mud, and it's now an absolute leader in a lot of these areas. So, I think the stick can be very powerful.
Lena.
I guess that all companies have some history that helps them to push some parts of their own agenda. And Skanska has that as well. But as it is today, we clearly have a strong leadership in our leadership position with working with our sustainability agenda to try to to look into what we can deliver and where we are different. So we thinking and acting differently than our competitors. But it also needs to be part of the overall strategy in the company, else we won't come anywhere, really.
Yes, if it's simply reactive to being embarrassed in public, you don't change the culture.
And then the carrot is that you actually get also some good business from it.
Because of the real front runners, they don't get so much help from the legislations, because they're already ahead of it. But the ones that are on the bottom, the very slow ones, they gain quite much from delaying it. So therefore, the ones that are really on the top, they might not really benefit so much for saying this is great, because they're already there.
So
legislation
which is why they
goes
don't
too
make
slowly.
the case for regulation, because they're ahead of it.
Yeah, but quite often they've gone too slowly. They're already there.
Okay.
Electronic industry, well, we have already phased out the brominated flame retardant, some of them will say then, so we don't need to fight for that now.
So I'm really glad that we heard from the plasticizer industry as to what their complaint about the SIN list was, because I think it talks about what the strength of the SIN list is. One of the challenges that we as regulators have is that when we put things on our lists, in order for them to get on our list, in order to get on California's list of candidate chemicals, you have to be on one of 23 lists. In order to get on the candidate chemical list for the REACH, there has to be a tremendous amount of a certain kind of data known. So they're very slow lists. They're non-responsive to new information that comes out or to new ways of synthesizing information that's coming out. We heard about OHAT that is being used, and there's other ways of looking at weight of evidence. So I think one of the things that you could do that would be very helpful to people is explain, so the, I don't remember which phthalate it was, but the phthalate that is on your list that has already been given a clean bill of health, quote unquote, from ECHA's perspective. I think it would be very helpful for you to talk about that delta. Why is it? Why is something on your list and not on somebody else's list? Because that's very telling about the limitations on some of these government lists that are very slow to change. So I think that what I would say to you is it is important for you to do these exercises of adding things on a regular basis, because we in government do it very rarely. Our list of about 1,200 chemicals, I honestly don't know when it's going to get changed. And when we want to add something to our list, when Prop 65 wants to add a new chemical to its list, oh my God, the amount of energy and lawyer dollars that go into keeping it off that list is phenomenal. Whereas you have the ability to be much more dynamic and responsive in your list. So I definitely think that there's a complementary role to an organization like ChemSec to maintaining the up-to-dateness of your list. And then I would say to the industry side that the power of looking at a SIN list as opposed to, say, California's list is that if you want to stay ahead, what is that thing that we haven't even gotten to yet as regulators? Look at the SIN list, because that's going to give you a much better signal for where things are going than my list is going to, or the Prop 65. So I think that is where we've got that nice bell-shaped curve of compliance versus innovation. You can help signal for the innovation direction. I actually agree with Anne-Sophie. I would say, what do regulators need to do? They need to get a backbone. They need to do what the mandate is, whether it's in California or in REACH. I think we're at a really critical moment in time in REACH where authorization, is it going to be real or not? Otherwise, all you've got is a listing of chemicals with information, which is great, but that's the first step. And if nothing actually happens, if there's no consequence in authorization, then companies understand that they can be transparent, but they don't have to do anything else. They don't have to change. And I think the same goes for California as well. We have not gotten through our process where we do that regulatory response, but what we're going to need to do in California is mean it and have a backbone. And if there is an alternative and it's not necessary, then we need to take action against companies who don't want to change. So that's my thing of what I think for ourselves need to do. For businesses, this is coming up over and over again for me, is I would like to see businesses be very explicit about the importance of taking into account their chemical footprint. We hear so much about carbon footprint, so much about water, so much about energy. I want to hear from industry how that it is key from the leadership perspective that they believe that this is important and what they're doing about it.
As investors, we we need information. Our lives are really around analysing information, and regulators have been, at least in Europe and certainly in the UK, very bad at providing information that they have in a format that's accessible for investors to use. So I'm not precisely sure what it would look like in this case, but more information that can be used by different stakeholder groups, including investors, would be very useful. And I think on the industry side, I just agree with with the previous comments really around getting this up on the agenda as high as carbon. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, you can't move for kind of carbon footprinting. It's just everywhere, and chemicals should be there as well.
Thank you very much. Eva-Lena.
Well, for policymakers, definitely continue on to drive this agenda, but also help to harmonize, because we are, many of us, international companies, and it helps us to see the same demands, and also to push us to actually, from the industry, to be brave and try to deliver, because we also need to have some help to be pushed.
Okay. I saw you nodding there, Julian, that international question.
You took the words right out of my mouth, as the song goes. Yeah, I mean, just to say, this week we have a big development in Taiwan, then it's Korea, then it's China, then it's the US. Maybe they will, maybe they won't reform TSCA. Really, harmonized decision-making, harmonized data requirements will create a level playing field and make things much easier for us. So really, we do see EU REACH as a leading regulation. It would be nice if the other regulating countries were following a similar approach. That would make life
And for the industry?
For the industry, I would say prioritize sustainability in your innovation programs. Make sure you've got product safety personnel like me involved in your product innovation work. Think about sustainability holistically, but include toxicity in that, and try and develop products which give multiple benefits which customers really will buy into.
Ladies and gentlemen, will you join me in thanking our panel very much indeed?